In a tense federal courtroom, the proceedings began as usual, until Judge Maxwell Carter took the bench, his expression dark with irritation. "No coffee in my court," he barked at the clerk, startling the young woman. He then snapped, "Tell the defense team they have 2 minutes. If they're not here, I'll hold them in contempt." The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Judge Carter, a well-known critic of Trump, was presiding over a case involving the Faith and Family Foundation, a conservative charity accused of financial fraud. His reputation for hostility toward conservative figures was well established, and today he seemed particularly on edge. A nervous clerk stepped forward. "Sir, Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt has arrived to testify." Judge Carter's expression soured. "Oh, how special," he sneered. "Tell her this isn't the White House. Her title means nothing here." Karoline Leavitt entered confidently, a thick stack of documents in hand. She acknowledged the court staff with a polite nod, but Carter glared at her, his fingers drumming impatiently on the bench. "Let me make one thing clear," he growled. "I am the law in this courtroom." "Got that, Miss Leavitt?" She met his gaze without hesitation, her expression calm but unyielding. "Understood, sir. But the law isn't something you can twist at will." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Carter's face turned red, his hands frozen mid-motion on the desk. "You dare lecture me about the law in my own courtroom?" He thundered. "You Trump Gen Z brat!" Gasps and whispers filled the room. In the back, a spectator muttered, "She's got guts." A few others chuckled, but Leavitt remained unfazed. She took a step forward, lifting her documents. Her voice was clear and steady. "I'm not here to lecture you, Your Honor. I'm here to testify to the truth, something you seem unwilling to hear." Carter slammed his gavel. "Silence," he roared. "You're not a lawyer, not a court official, just another empty Trump mouthpiece. What makes you think you have a say here?" Leavitt's eyes locked onto his, her voice firm. "I have a say when justice is at stake, sir. This case involves the Faith and Family Foundation, AI, charity our administration supports. I have evidence of their financial transparency, and you need to see it." Carter scoffed, leaning back as if amused. "Evidence? A charity?" He jeered. "I know this game. Rich conservatives hiding money behind faith and family. Don't waste my time with fairy tales." Unfazed, Leavitt flipped open her documents. March 15, 2024, the Faith and Family Foundation held a donor meeting in Manchester, New Hampshire. Every contribution was recorded publicly. "Enough." Carter slammed the gavel again. "I don't need to hear this nonsense. This is a courtroom, not a White House press briefing." Leavitt didn't flinch. She raised her voice, unwavering. "Including independent audit records proving no fraud. Do you want to see them, or are you afraid the truth will embarrass you?" The room fell into a stunned silence. The young clerk shrank in her seat, bracing for what would come next. Carter gritted his teeth, gripping his gavel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You're crossing the line, Leavitt," he snarled. "One more word, and I'll hold you in contempt." Leavitt merely shrugged, her defiance unmistakable. "If you want to jail me for telling the truth, go ahead. But I won't stay silent while you try to bury justice." Carter shot up from his chair, pointing a trembling finger at her. "Justice? You dare talk to me about justice? A Trump puppet? A little girl who knows nothing about the law? Lecturing me?" He banged the gavel repeatedly, his anger palpable. But his eyes flickered with something else, uncertainty, as they darted to the documents in Leavitt's hands. She gave him a knowing smile. "I don't need to lecture you, Your Honor. Your actions speak for themselves." The defense attorney standing beside Leavitt finally spoke. "Your Honor, we simply wish to establish context. These documents were properly filed during discovery." Artur slammed his gavel once more, his voice booming. "Context? I don't—" And at that moment the entire courtroom knew he wasn't in control anymore. "This is a financial fraud case, not a charity event," Judge Maxwell Carter snapped, his voice laced with frustration. "Shut up, or you'll be held in contempt too." He slammed his gavel down, but this time the sound was weaker, his grip slipping, his control unraveling. Karoline Leavitt took another step forward, her voice slicing through the lingering echo of the gavel. "If you don't want to hear about faith and family, then let's talk about the Liberty Fund." Does that name ring a bell, Your Honor? Judge Carter froze. His hand, still clutching the gavel, hovered mid-air. The flush in his face drained away, leaving his skin pale. His eyes darted rapidly, blinking as if she had struck a nerve. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Leavitt tilted her head slightly, her gaze locking onto him like a predator eyeing its prey. "The Liberty Fund," she repeated, drawing out each syllable, letting the weight of the words settle over the room. "You know, the group that funneled money into your offshore account, oddly timed with rulings against conservative defendants." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Murmurs erupted, phones shot up, their cameras capturing every moment. A man in the back row exhaled sharply. "No way," he whispered to the person beside him. Carter's gavel struck the bench again, this time with desperate force. The handle nearly snapped under the impact. "Silence. Silence now," he roared, his voice cracking, his hands trembling. "You have no right to make baseless accusations in my courtroom." But the panic in his eyes betrayed him. Sweat trickled down his temple, his breathing quick and ragged. Leavitt remained steady. She lifted a sheet of paper, her voice razor-sharp. "Baseless?" she echoed, unfazed. "This is a bank statement with your signature, Your Honor, dated March 16th, 2024, one day after the Liberty Fund meeting. $100,000 deposit into your Cayman Islands account. How do you explain that?" Judge Carter blinked, his fingers clumsily running through his disheveled hair. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape. That's fabricated," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You dare slander me? I'll make you pay for this." Leavitt didn't flinch, her voice dropped to a chilling calm. "The question is, do you dare deny it?" She flipped to another page, her tone measured and deliberate. "April 20th, another $50,000 from the same source. Want me to keep going?" Judge Carter didn't answer. He slumped back into his chair, gripping the desk like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His wild eyes flicked from the document to Leavitt, then to the spectators whose phones were still trained on him. He sucked in a breath, trying to gather himself. Then, with a sudden burst of defiance, he shot up, pointing, a trembling finger at Leavitt. "You have no proof," he bellowed. "This is a Trump circus designed to ruin me." His voice wavered, his desperation seeping through every word. Leavitt merely smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "Regret? No, Your Honor. I'm just getting started." The tension in the courtroom thickened. Carter gripped the desk's edge as if it could steady him. His authority, once absolute, was now crumbling under the weight of the evidence. "Deny it?" he barked, his voice trembling. "I don't need to deny anything. It's all lies. Where'd you get that garbage?" Leavitt didn't blink. "Defamation?" she repeated, feigning amusement. "This isn't just talk. This is evidence." She flipped to another document. June 12th, 2024, an email from you to a Liberty Fund representative. "Thanks for the timely support. Faith and family will be handled as planned." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A woman in the back clutched her chest. "Oh my God. Is that real?" she whispered. Cameras flashed. The murmurs grew into a chaotic buzz. Carter slammed his gavel furiously. "Silence!" he roared, his face now a deep shade of purple. "It's forged. I never sent any email. This is a Trump plot to destroy me." He turned to the young court clerk, his voice frantic. "Record this now. She's making up stories in my courtroom." But the clerk didn't move. She kept her head down, her hands trembling over her papers, too afraid to look up. Leavitt's smirk deepened. She lifted another sheet, her tone icy. "Forged? Then why does this email come from your official address, Your Honor? And why does it match a $75,000 deposit into your Cayman account that same day?" She tilted her head slightly, eyes sharp as daggers. "Want me to read more? Or will you explain it yourself?" Judge Carter swayed slightly, his grip tightening on the chair. You have no right," he screeched, his voice high and shrill. "This is my courtroom. I won't let a political puppet turn it into a circus." His gavel slammed down again, and again. But this time, each strike only revealed how much power he had already lost. "I'll have you dragged out," Judge Maxwell Carter bellowed, but the authority in his voice had crumbled. Fear had taken its place, raw and unfiltered, as his eyes flicked to the damning documents in Karoline Leavitt's hands. She took another step forward, her voice slicing through the courtroom like a blade. "Forbid me. You don't have the power to forbid the truth, Your Honor." Carter gritted his teeth, but she didn't give him a chance to speak. "Let's talk about the Thompson case from last month." Leavitt flipped another page. "A small business owner lost everything because you refused to review his charities. Evidence, just like this case. 2 days later, your Cayman account saw an $80,000 boost from the Liberty Fund. Quite the coincidence, huh?" The courtroom erupted. "Corruption, plain as day," a man in the back shouted. Phones were raised, recording every second. The chaos surged as murmurs turned into outright accusations. Carter's gavel slammed down with force. "Enough," he roared. "I am a federal judge, not some crook for you to slander." His hands shook as he turned to the court officers. "Get her out of here, now, that's an order." But the officers hesitated. They exchanged uncertain glances. One of them, a middle-aged bailiff, shook his head, shoulders sagging as if he'd finally lost faith in the man he was supposed to serve. Carter spun back, his face pale, his finger jabbing toward Leavitt. "You think you're clever, don't you?" His voice wavered, laced with desperation. "You and Trump will pay for crossing me." Leavitt remained unfazed. She lifted another sheet, her voice icy. "Clever? No, Your Honor. I just have the truth." She turned the page. "Here's a bank statement from May 2024, the Wilson case. You sealed all the records right after meeting with the Liberty Fund, and the next day $150,000 landed in your account. What do you call that? A job bonus?" The courtroom roared again. "Arrest him!" a woman shouted as camera flashes lit up Carter's panic-stricken face. This time Carter didn't reach for the gavel. He pounded both fists against the desk, his whole body shaking. "You have no proof," he screamed. "It's all fake. I'll sue you, sue Trump, sue your entire conservative mob." But sweat dripped down his forehead, his breath coming in short, frantic gasps. He turned, desperate now, to the defense attorney sitting silently beside him. "Stop her!" Carter barked. "She can't do this." The attorney, a young woman with a tight jaw, hesitated before rising to her feet. Her voice, however, was unsteady. "Your Honor, these documents were properly filed during discovery." "You can't stop her." Carter gawked at her, betrayed. Then slowly he turned back to Leavitt. His eyes were wild now. "What do you want, huh?" His voice cracked. "To ruin me?" Leavitt exhaled softly, then gave him a smile, cold and final. "No, Your Honor," she said. "You ruined yourself when you sold out justice." She lifted a small device from her pocket, holding it up for all to see. "This is a recording from your office. Want to hear your own voice?" Carter's lips parted. His breath hitched. No, but Leavitt had already pressed play. His own voice filled the courtroom, clear and undeniable. "Wipe all the Faith and Family files. I don't want them in the trial. If anyone asks, say they're lost." A stunned silence followed. Then, chaos. A man in the back gasped, "Oh my God, no way." The clerk, the young woman who had been sitting motionless behind her desk, suddenly burst into tears. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. "He made me do it," she sobbed. "He said he'd ruin my career if I didn't." Her admission sent a fresh wave of outrage through the crowd. "Blatant corruption," a woman shouted. Carter's face drained of all color. He staggered back, hands trembling, eyes darting desperately for an escape. "Stop it, turn it off," he bellowed, lunging toward Leavitt. She stepped back swiftly, keeping the recorder out of reach. He stumbled, his foot caught on the edge of the platform, and then he fell. Papers scattered across the floor as he crashed. Down, arms flailing, his gavel rolling away and coming to a stop at Leavitt's feet. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and in that moment, as the entire courtroom bore witness to his downfall, it became clear. Judge Maxwell Carter's reign was over. The courtroom erupted, angry jeers clashing with shouts of outrage. Maxwell Carter scrambled to his feet, his robe askew, hair a disheveled mess. He no longer looked like a federal judge, just a man unraveling. "It's fake," he shrieked, jabbing a trembling finger at Leavitt. "You made it up. It's a Trump conspiracy." Leavitt stood motionless, her gaze locked on him. "Fake?" she echoed, her voice cold and sharp. "Then why are you panicking?" She took a slow step forward, lifting another page. "If this isn't real, just calmly prove it, but I'm afraid you can't." She flipped the paper over. "This is security footage from your office. July 10th, 11:00 p.m. It shows you ordering evidence to be destroyed. Want to hear more?" Carter's breath hitched. Sweat dripped down his face as he wiped at it with shaking hands. Then, he did the unthinkable. With a desperate, choked gasp, he bolted. "I can't take this anymore," he wailed, sprinting for the back door, the entrance to his private chambers. 2 court officers reacted instantly, blocking his escape. "Sir, you can't leave," one said, his tone firm. Carter whirled on them, his face ghostly pale. "You're betraying me, all of you," he screeched, flailing wildly like a trapped animal. The courtroom descended into chaos. Spectators leapt to their feet, some clapping, others booing. "Serves him right," a man called out as cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment. Carter staggered back toward the bench, his hands slamming onto the desk. But the gavel was gone, lying abandoned, on the floor from his earlier outburst. "It's a setup," he wailed. His voice cracked, rising to a frantic pitch. "She and Trump framed me. I'm a federal judge. You can't touch me." Leavitt stepped closer, her voice like a verdict. "A setup? No, Your Honor. This is the truth, and you can't escape it." She flipped another page. "August 5th, an email from you to the Liberty Fund. The next case will need more support. Make sure the money's on time." "Anything to say?" Carter clutched the edge of his chair, his wide eyes darting for an escape. That's fake," he stammered, but his voice was weak, unconvincing. A sudden sob broke through the tension. The clerk, young, shaken, rose from her seat, her tear-streaked face twisted with guilt. "He forced me to do it," she cried, her voice cracking. "He said I'd lose my job if I didn't erase the files. I didn't want to, but I was scared." A final blow. The courtroom exploded once more. "Arrest him now," someone shouted as applause rippled through the back. Carter spun toward the clerk, his face flushing deep purple with rage. "Shut up," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You traitor, I'll ruin you." But the threat only exposed his desperation. He turned back to Leavitt, screaming, "Happy now? What more do you want?" Leavitt didn't smile. Her gaze was steady, powerful. "I want justice, Your Honor, and you're not getting away." Carter's hands trembled so violently that his chair nearly toppled. "You've got nothing," he howled. "I'm the law. I'll overrule—" But he never finished. Leavitt lifted the recorder again, her finger hovering over the play button. "Want me to play another clip?" she asked, voice lethal. "Or should I let the FBI handle it?" Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Only Carter's ragged breathing and the clerk's quiet sobs filled the air. He tried to muster a roar. You wouldn't dare," but his voice cracked, pleading now. Leavitt's expression didn't waver. "Wouldn't dare," she repeated, voice cutting, like a blade. "You're wrong, Your Honor. I'd do anything to protect justice." She pressed play. Carter's own voice echoed through the courtroom, clear and damning. "Thanks, Liberty Fund. The money's in. Faith and family won't be an issue." The courtroom exploded. "Unbelievable," a man in the back shouted. The clerk gasped. She pointed at Carter, her hands shaking. "That's true. He made that call right in front of me." Carter lunged, wild, desperate, reaching across the desk to snatch the device. "Turn it off," he shrieked. "Turn it off now." But in his frantic rush he tripped, his foot caught on the chair. With a crash he hit the ground hard, sending a water glass toppling over. Papers scattered, a puddle forming around him as laughter mixed with furious shouts from the audience. Carter crawled up, his robe soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked nothing like a judge now. Just a broken man. It's fake, he screamed again, pointing at Leavitt with a trembling hand. You and Trump set this up. I'll sue you all. Leavitt stood firm, her gaze never leaving him. Fake? She asked, her voice like ice. Then why are you so terrified? She raised her phone. One final blow. On the screen, a security recording played. Carter sitting in his office, phone in hand, his own voice sealing his fate. Money's on time. I'll handle the next case as planned. The image reflected back. At him, the truth staring him down, and in that moment, Maxwell Carter knew it was over. The courtroom erupted again. A woman's voice cut through the chaos. Arrest him now. Applause and boos collided into a chaotic symphony as Maxwell Carter staggered, his hands gripping the desk like a man drowning. His eyes were vacant, the look of someone who had just realized he'd lost. Then, with the last shred of his strength, he did something no one expected. With a snarl, Carter lunged across the table, ripping the documents from Leavitt's hands. You've got nothing, he bellowed, tearing them to shreds in front of the entire courtroom. Papers flew like a storm of confetti. No one will believe you. But the act only made him look more desperate. Leavitt didn't flinch. She took a single step back, her gaze like ice. You just dug your own grave deeper, Your Honor, she said, her voice calm. I have copies, and so does the FBI. Carter froze. His hands, full of shredded evidence, began to tremble. He panted heavily, his chest rising and falling in jagged bursts. He looked around, at the contempt in the audience's eyes, at the icy silence from the court staff, at Leavitt, standing unwavering. You can't do this to me, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm a federal judge. I have power. His plea was drowned out by the sudden thud of heavy footsteps. The main doors swung open. An FBI team strode in, the lead agent, tall, commanding, his badge gleaming under the harsh courtroom lights, stepping forward. Judge Maxwell Carter, he declared, his voice like thunder. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of corruption, abuse of power, and destruction of evidence. The courtroom exploded. Applause roared. Shouts of justice rang from the back. Carter whirled around, his face ashen, his body shaking. You can't do this, he shrieked. I have immunity. I have connections. The lead agent didn't react. He merely signaled his men forward. The handcuffs gleamed. Carter thrashed, one last wild attempt to run, but the court officers blocked his path. You're not going anywhere, one of them said firmly. The agent gripped Carter's arm. We know exactly who you are, Your Honor, he said, voice low but firm. We also know about the Liberty Fund, your offshore accounts, and what you did with the Faith and Family Foundation. He tightened his hold. It ends today. With a sharp click, the cold steel cuffs snapped around Carter's wrists. He stopped struggling, his head bowed, like a man who knew he had lost everything. The audience erupted once more. A group stood clapping. Someone yelled, "Record this. Let the world see." The clerk, still crying, turned to the agent, trembling. I'll tell you everything, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He forced me to do it all. The agent nodded, motioning for another officer to take her statement. Leavitt stood silent, arms crossed, as Carter was dragged down the aisle. At the last moment, he looked up, his eyes, blazing with venom, locked onto her. Think you've won, little girl? He whispered, voice trembling but sharp as a blade. There will always be someone to replace me. You won't change a thing. Leavitt tilted her head slightly. Her expression was calm, unmoved, unshaken. No, Your Honor, she said, her voice steady and unwavering. Justice won, and you lost because of yourself. Carter's mouth opened as if to retort, but an agent yanked his arm, cutting him off. Let's go, the agent growled. Carter was dragged away, powerless to resist. The courtroom roared. A woman in the back shouted. He got what he deserved. Phone flashes popped, cameras rolled, and then the heavy doors slammed shut. The reign of Judge Maxwell Carter was over. Leavitt exhaled, turning to the lead agent. She handed over the last untouched folder of documents. "Here's everything I've got," she said, voice steady. "Bank statements, emails, videos. I trust you'll need them to take down the rest." The agent took them with a look of approval. "Thank you, Miss Leavitt," he said. "You've done more than we could have hoped." Then he turned to his team, nodding. "Seal off Carter's desk." And just like that, the cleanup began. Justice had finally caught up. "We need everything," the lead agent said, his voice low and firm. "Files, hard drives, anything connected to the Liberty Fund." A young agent stepped forward, holding a worn cardboard box he had just pulled from under the desk. "Sir, found something." "Here," he said, lifting the lid. Inside, a stack of classified documents lay hidden beneath dust-covered folders. The agent flipped through them, his breath catching as he uncovered a list. 7 names, all federal judges. Each name was meticulously paired with dates, case details, and large sums funneled through the Liberty Fund. Every ruling was tied to conservative organizations or individuals who had been targeted and silenced. The lead agent exhaled sharply, turning to Leavitt. "You were right," he said, his expression darkening. "This isn't just about Carter, there's an entire network." Leavitt's fingers tightened around the edges of the list, her eyes burning with determination. "I suspected as much," she murmured. "And if there are more like him, I'll help you find them." The agent studied her for a moment before giving a rare nod of approval. "We'll need you as a witness for the bigger investigation." Leavitt didn't hesitate. "I'm in." The courtroom. Once a chaotic battleground had quieted, but the air still crackled with tension and anticipation. From the sidelines, the young defense attorney who had stood by Leavitt throughout approached, her voice unsteady with emotion. "You just saved the Faith and Family Foundation. And not just them. You made history today." Leavitt turned to her, her gaze softening for the first time. "No," she said simply. "We just restored justice. This is a win for everyone Carter tried to destroy." The attorney smiled, blinking back tears. "Still, you were incredible." The audience, no longer restrained by decorum, erupted into applause. An older man stood clapping slowly, then others followed. A woman in the back raised her phone. "She's our hero." Meanwhile, the court clerk, still shaken, turned to the FBI agent with trembling hands. "I'll tell you everything," she said, voice quivering. "He forced me to destroy evidence, threatened me for months." The agent jotted down notes, nodding. "You did the right thing by coming forward. We'll protect you." Leavitt stood in the center of it all, arms crossed, her gaze sweeping the room. The torn scraps of evidence Carter had tried to destroy, the contempt in the eyes of those who once feared him, and the unshaken resolve of those ready to fight back. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against the tiny recorder she had kept running the entire time. Her grip tightened. "If you find more evidence," she said, turning to the agent, "let me know. I want to see every last one of them. Pay." The agent met her gaze, his expression resolute. "You've opened a door no one dared touch. We'll be in contact." As the agents continued their search, a single sheet of paper fluttered from the box. A printed email from Carter to the Liberty Fund. "Need more support for the next case. Make sure no one knows." The young agent picked it up, his face darkening, as he handed it to his superior. Looks like he wasn't working alone. The lead agent studied the email, then glanced at Leavitt. "You were right from the start," he admitted. "This is bigger than we thought." Leavitt said nothing. She simply gave a small nod, her mind already racing ahead. Carter might be in cuffs, but the real battle was just beginning. She stepped away, from the witness stand, her stance unshaken. The courtroom filled with applause once more, but Leavitt didn't linger in the moment. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge. It was about dismantling the entire system that had allowed him to thrive, and she was just getting started.